Hi guys, I'm Will from Twin Peaks Fly Fishing, and in this episode I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Skagit lines. We're going to talk about the applications of use, what we're thinking when we're fishing Skagit lines, the casting technique that we generally use with them, and matching that Skagit line to your rod effectively. So first of all, let's talk about applications of use. The Skagit line is a head system, okay? So the Skagit itself is just a head. On that we need a running line going to the backing, and they are designed to be always fished with a tip. So it's essentially a multi-tip system, okay? Generally with the Skagit heads, because they turn over, they've got a relatively compact front taper and quite an aggressive front taper actually, so they're designed to turn over heavy sink tips with ease. So generally when we're fishing with them, we're thinking about fishing at depth, and they're designed to be able to turn over heavy sink tips really easy, so it makes fishing deep actually really quite easy. Often they come in floating, float intermediate sink 3, they come in a range of different densities, but one of the key things for me, especially with the floating Skagit, is the mending capability, and it allows us to fish a heavy sink tip on a floating line, and we're able to mend it very, very easily to really control where that fly is. And with a heavy sink tip, it allows you to drop those flies in little pockets of water, in where there's fast water. You can throw some slack into it and you can really get good depth quickly. So first of all, I'm thinking about depth and where I can get depth easily. Second of all, they're really good when you're short on space. If you're in a really tricky spot where there's not much backcasting space, maybe you've got trees or you're on a high bank and there's rocks behind you, the nature of the short head makes it very easy to make a cast without much space behind you. So you can generally just hold the rod up, have a little bit of a D-loop just hanging under the rod tip, and you're going to be able to make a cast. That's the nature of, if you look at the back of this, you'll see just how much weight is in this back end. You know, most of the weight is compacted into the back end of the line. So that means that when you're casting, that's all that weight is right underneath the rod tip, making it much easier to cast without much line out to the end of the rod. So that's the applications of use. Generally, if I'm fishing floating lines and I'm wanting to fish on the surface and presentation is important to me, the Skagit is not the tool for the job. The Skagit is a tool that is very, very effective at doing what it does best, and that's casting heavy sink tips with ease in tight spots especially. It's a tool I wouldn't be without, but I wouldn't have it as the only line in my arsenal. If you're fishing in the summer, you're generally going to want a much better presentation line. Okay, so when do we use them the most? Generally for me personally, I'm using the Skagits a lot in the spring when the water's cold and depth is important. We go down to South America every year fishing for the king salmon. King salmon are notorious for sitting in the water deep, and generally in the river that we go to in fast flowing water, which means depth is key. So with the Skagit we're able to cast heavy sink tips. We've got the mending capability to present that fly really slowly at depth. So for that application of fishing, the Skagit is absolutely imperative, and it's the only line that really does the job for us most effectively. With being a tip system, it's also very easy to change your tip easily. So you can fish the head of the pool with a heavy T18, maybe even a T20 tip where that water velocity is fast, and then very quickly and easily you can change down to a T10, a T14, or even if you've got 15-foot tips, you can put a normal sink 5 or a sink 3 on the end. In terms of casting the Skagits, okay, Skagits are designed to be used with a sink tip or a tip of sort. The thing you've got to remember is with that aggressive front taper, that Skagit needs a good anchor, okay? So we need a good sink tip on the end. If I was to put a floating line or an intermediate or maybe just a sink 3, a light tip on the end of it, this Skagit's going to want to pull that off really quickly. So generally if I'm fishing lighter tips, I'm going to be looking at the 15-foot range. You know, I'm going to need an anchor to hold that line in place for us to make that forward cast. Generally, as a rule of thumb, tips come in various different lengths. For me personally, with 14 to 15 foot rods, I'm generally thinking 12-foot tip is about the minimum I'd go to. And if I'm using 15-foot rods down in South America, we often put on 15 or 18-foot tips. It's designed so that it'll take it and it'll cast it okay for you. In terms of casting style and casting techniques, because of the profile of the line, and because we need that good anchor to hold that line in place while we make the forward cast, generally the sustained anchor casts are much better. So the circle C's and the double spays, that allows that tip just to bite into the water, so when you come back up into the D loop and you make the cast, the anchor's going to hold for us to be able to make the cast easily. If we've got a short tip, if we've got a 5 or a 10 foot light tip on that and we make that forward cast, the Skagit is likely to pull the anchor out of the water and you're going to get a blown anchor or hook the trees behind you. So generally, waterborne anchors or sustained anchor casts, circle C, double spay, work really, really well with the Skagits. And now for the final thing, matching the Skagit to your rod. Okay, slightly confusing. When Skagits first came about, they were all measured in grains, and you didn't get a line rating on them. Now that started to change now, and a lot of the modern lines come with the line rating as well, which makes life much easier. But if you're looking at a Skagit that doesn't have the line rating on it and just has the grain weight, you've got to match that to your rod. So you're going to go online and find out what the recommended grain weight, casting weight is for your rod, and then you're going to match it to the line. Now we get quite a few questions, a little bit of confusion on what equation do we need to add up. Do we need to add up the Skagit and the grains of the sink tip that we're putting on? The answer to that is no. And the reason for that is the Skagit is always the casting weight, and generally with the style of casting with the Skagit lines is the whole tip is the anchor. So the whole tip is in the water, which means your casting weight is still only the grains that's on your line. So very important, if you're, for a 9 weight, if you're looking around between 600 and 650 grains, that will work on your rod. You do not need to add on the grain rating on the tip as well. So that's the Skagit for me. It's a line that I wouldn't be without. It's a tool in the kit that absolutely we do need, and I've found on countless occasions where you've got heavy fast water and you fish it down with a normal, say, multi-tip line with maybe a sink 5 tip on it. Maybe that would be perfect for the middle and the tail of the pool and we've caught fish. But being able to go back up to the top and fish a Skagit in a heavy T14 or a T18 just to get down where that water velocity is fast, that's often pulled fish out of the bag for me. I hope that was helpful, guys. Please feel free to send any messages with any more questions, and we'd be happy to answer them. Thanks a lot.